you. Yes, loud and clear. So, Ted Heiman is joining me, and Ted made the fatal mistake of calling me up about a month ago and saying, "Hey, I need some help." And I said, "I've got an idea. Why don't we do that live?" So, hopefully, you're not regretting that moment. Um, but Ted is a fantastic, very experienced technology seller, uh, lots of credentials, and I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about his sales journey here. So, Ted, thank you for being here.
Absolutely, my pleasure to be here with you, Julie. I'm sorry about the little technical snafu, but we'll talk about that as we go, because that's one of the things that we deal with when we're trying to do these video chats. And so I've been in cybersecurity for about 20 years, and I've primarily focused on helping large enterprises security technology problems. And so the corporations, large corporations, when they have to deploy technology, it's usually a very complicated. It takes a long time. There's a lot of logistics, and you spend a lot of time together. And so I have spent my career in sales up until COVID, doing most of my meetings and most of my work face to face with my customers and their teams. And when COVID came, it kind of took that away from me. I felt like some of my superpowers as a sales guy were removed, and I've just really struggled with trying to have the kind of presence that I'd really like to have. And what really pushed me to call you, Julie, was I did a podcast, a video podcast, and I was just so disappointed with how I looked and how I came across on the screen. And I just said, I got to get with Julie. Julie can help me. And so that's what initiated the call.
Oh, well, first of all, most people don't do anything with that information. They see it and they're like, oh, I'm going to watch this with one eye closed, right? That's how I used to, even as an actor, I hated watching myself on video. But, to see that and go, I know I can be more, impactful, and then do something about it is a great step. I commend you for. But I think you said something that I hear from a lot of salespeople, which is they had all this experience working in person, and you walk into a room, you feel confident, you can, there's energy, whatever that energy that takes place between people. You can read the room very easily and quickly. Um, if you've got experience like you do, you can help these people solve their problems. So when you are seated in front of a camera, what happens in I guess in your head, in your body, that makes it so different?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is psychological. I feel like I'm, under the spotlight, and I feel like everything that I do is, being scrutinized, and everything that I say is being scrutinized. And because I'm not comfortable, I'm not able to be my best self as a salesperson.
Mhm.
Meaning, like, if I'm worrying about how I look or how I sound or what my background looks like, or whatever it is, then I'm not focused on what I need to be doing, which is building a relationship with a customer or client,
Mm.
and trying to establish some kind of relationship that allows us to then move into a business discussion around how I might be able to help them solve a problem that they have with a technology or service that I offer. And so it's just really, I think it creates a level of noise around me that's
Mm.
unnecessary. And so if I felt more confident, like I did kind of pre-COVID, walking into the lobby and, you know, shaking somebody's hand and meeting them and introducing them, and being able to feel their energy and get that feedback,
Mhm.
that's the part that I miss. And so it's those two pieces. The one piece where uh, I'm worried about how I look and how I come across, and the second piece is that I don't feel like I can, that I don't have the same feedback and I don't have that same energy connection with the individual on the other side of the screen. And so,
Right.
and that's what I'm looking for. I mean, that selling is all about building relationships. So if you can't, if we have to do it this way, and it looks like for a while, you know, we're going to be doing things differently, like we've been for the past couple of years. And so those of us who have spent our career in sales have to relearn how to do this and do it effectively if we're going to be continue to be successful.
Well said. And I think you are, you hit it on the head, because what you talked about is all this noise, like you said, and these this discomfort and inability to read the room and feel that energy. Uh, and all it's doing is it's keeping you from being present. And that's what you were able to do in person, was you were fully present. And so when we talk about virtual presence or virtual executive presence, which is what I focus on, the big piece of that is, you got to be present. And to be present means you can't be thinking about, should I move here? Should I look here? What, oh gosh, what is everybody thinking? Am I talking too much? The more you're in your head, obviously the less present you're going to be. And that's not a good place for salespeople to be when they are trying to, you know, connect with someone, like you said, build a relationship. And so what we have to do is try to get that back in this somewhat artificial environment. And it takes a while to do that. Um, Great comment from Art here. So many people talk to their screen as if they're engaging us, but this isn't where we are, right? We have to meet people where they are. I just got into a conversation on LinkedIn with somebody said, well, I think we're really getting used to people looking down at us on camera. And it's like, well, we may be very familiar with it because that is the standard, right? But that doesn't erase a lifetime of being trained since we're infants, that if you look me in the eye, you are paying attention and you're credible and you're confident and you're listening to me. So you can pretend that doesn't matter because we have a lot of, this bad or, not effective behavior on video, but that's a fact. And maybe your colleagues and your family and your friends will let you get away with that and they won't think differently. But when you're trying to make a first impression, as you are in sales, all those things matter, right? So,
I absolutely right. I mean, let's just think about it when you meet somebody in person. If you walk up and meet somebody in person and you shake their hand and you say, "Hi, I'm Ted Heiman," you kind of expect them to shake your hand and look you in the eye. That's kind of the expectation. And if you meet somebody and you're talking to them and they're not looking you in the eye, then the perception is either we're not engaging or they don't really, what I'm discussing is it just really isn't that important to them. And I
right.
think that for me, this was like, and you helped me tremendously, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but some of the capabilities and tools and stuff that you mentioned have really helped me improve that ability to at least engage the camera. So I feel like I'm doing my best to be looking you in the eye. But it's very distracting because while you're doing that, there's all this other stuff going on the camera. You got a picture of you, and depending on how many other people are on there. So, it's a little bit difficult, but I think that with some of the tools that you've shared with me and how I've changed my setup as far as trying to optimize my system so that I actually have the highest likelihood of having a successful conversation with somebody. I'm not
Right.
just using my laptop camera, like my integrated laptop camera, which generally in most cases
Terrible.
isn't very effective.
Yeah, your setup is much improved. I think before do the before and after of how you were sitting.
Oh, so
Where-
I was telling Julie that I end up generally in two different positions. I either end up here where I'm fully engaged and my face is basically taking up the full camera, or I tend to be sitting back here where I'm relaxed in my office chair, just kind of taking it in.
Mhm.
And those are the two positions that I'm kind of comfortable in. And as we discussed earlier,
Right.
there's middle ground, and there's opportunity to find a place where maybe you're not the most comfortable, but where you come across as being, more comfortable, and you're better positioned within the screen, I guess, when
Absolutely. And you found it. You're in what's called a medium close up where we can see a little of your torso, so you have access to gesture. You've got, a little bit of space. You're not crowding the screens. There's a little depth. So, yes, very good. And I love what you said about being comfortable. I would say, I don't want it. I don't want you to be uncomfortable, but is that your first priority when you go into an in-person meeting? Like, I'm gonna be comfortable here, folks. So,
you don't even
no,
think about it.
right?
Yeah.
It's not. You sit in the uncomfortable chair, you sit up straight, you stand in front of a room, you contort your body so that people can see the screen behind you. So when people say, "Well, I just want to be natural and do what be myself," it's like, okay, but I'm not sure when you equate natural with being comfortable, those are two different things. And frankly, nothing uh this is all new, so it's not going to feel natural at first, just like most things that we learned weren't natural. So I think that that's a big piece of what we have to kind of get rid of, that notion of, well, I just want to be natural, and we want to be ourselves. We want to be our best selves. And so what do we need to do to bring our best selves to the camera? So I thought what we do today is role play. I know you're doing some interviews, and I thought that might be a good place to start in terms of asking you an interview question. And what I want you to do is just answer it like you would. I don't want you to try anything different, but just so we can kind of get a baseline and see where you're at in terms of communicating and connecting through the camera. And
Perfect.
I'll say this to the audience: if I'm on camera, I may not be modeling great eye contact as I'm watching Ted. So FYI, do as I do, not as I say, right here. Okay, so I want you to be kind of be specific in mind of who you might be talking to. I think it's always much easier to be specific in role play, so you can have someone, a particular job or company that you're interviewing with, a specific person. So, do you have someone in mind? Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we've maybe had a little small talk, a little introduction, and I'm going to hit you with the hard question. So, Ted, tell me, why should we hire you?
The reason I think you should hire me has to do with the contribution that I believe that I can make to the organization. I've been a top salesperson for the last 5 companies that I've worked, President's Club, and I believe that I can bring the knowledge, experience, and the ability to generate revenue that you're looking for in this role.
Okay. All right. So that was nice. That was very appropriate uh, in terms of words, and your eye contact was great. So you did a nice job there. I know. See, you've been working on that, so that's good.
I have to really concentrate, though. I mean, it's an effort. It's not something
Mhm.
that doesn't come naturally. I really have
Right.
to work
Yeah,
through it.
and it's not natural. So it is an effort at first, but you're practicing it, and that's how it gets better. I hear a lot of advice out there, just keep going on camera and you'll get better after, after multiple times. Well, not if you're reinforcing bad habits, right? And right now there's a lot of reinforcement of bad habits out there, but you're developing a good habit. So soon it will be just second nature, and it won't be part of that noise that keeps you from being fully present. But as you practice, it certainly will be a little more forefront than it will. So I want to talk about something that is really, I think, appropriate for most people on video, and that is, and you had mentioned this about the energy in the room. Like, when you walk in a person and you shake their hand and there's energy, that is gone, right? So there's not that in-person energy, and then what happens is the camera takes away a big chunk of our energy anyway. It sort of flattens things down. We're in a nice seated, maybe comfy chair, which is not a high energy position, right? So we have to sort of bring that energy back into the call. I worked with a reporter for the Seattle Seahawks, and she said that when she is on camera, she has to bring enough energy for herself and the other person, because you are not going to get that energy from the other person. And we're not used to that, right? That's very unnatural. And so there's ways to counter that. But first, it starts with making sure we're bringing the right level of energy. So what I'd like you to do, and this is an exercise I have everybody do, because almost everybody comes with this lower energy, which is fine for, like I said, you're talking to a peer, a colleague. But we want to come across, I mean, how do you want to come across in an interview? I guess I should ask.
Well, no, I agree with your statement, and I think that, yeah, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, but you need to get in the proper mindset before you get on one of these calls, and kind of get yourself hyped up and kind of build up that energy and get in that positive mindset. So you're like
Right.
really kind of revved up and ready to go. And so people can really feel that energy, because
Okay. That you just brought up a great point. People can feel, because right now what you're doing is you are relying, and not, when I say you, I mean most people, you're relying on your words to do all the work, right? You say the right words, they sound good, and they sound like everybody else, right? So how do we want, how do you want that hiring manager to feel about what you're saying?
I want them to feel the power of my words. I want them um, to get a sense for the positive energy. Sales is one of those things that it's hard work, and it takes a lot of effort, and you have to really put in the time to be an excellent salesperson. And so this is now just one more thing, one more tool that you have to have in your bag if you're going to be successful in sales today. And so it's something that we all have to learn, that we all have to work on, and we all have to continue to improve, so that, yes, we can feel comfortable in this mode. And that, yes, we can deliver a discussion that has a level of energy that gets our clients excited, as opposed to them just getting on another boring Zoom call or whatever, Teams call or whatever.
Right.
Imagine, most of us go from meeting to meeting all day long, go from web meeting to web meeting, whether we're working internally or externally. We just go from meeting to meeting. And at some point, your energy just is like, okay, another meeting. Yeah. And so when you have to get prepared for a client or an interview, you really have to like focus on building that energy and creating that spark. And I think it's something that you have to consciously be focused on to do it effectively.
Absolutely. It's not going to just happen sitting in your chair thinking about it. Uh, so there's a couple things that I have people do, and they're really acting based exercises, which is a lot of what I teach, because it's very appropriate to being on camera. But obviously, actors, just like us, have to be. They can't get to their peak state a minute after the camera's on, right? That's too late. And salespeople also can't warm up on their audience in those first minutes, which is what I typically see. And they maybe hit their stride a couple minutes in, but people are forming first impressions right away. And so you're already set the bar, you've made it harder for yourself. So we have to, have that energy be in the right spot right from the beginning. So what I'd like you to do, and you brought more energy just as you were talking about that last subject. You're passionate about it. You're in the moment. I want you to answer that interview question again. And this time I want you to just think about what you said. You want me to feel the power of what you can bring. You want me to be excited about, the experience that you can bring to our organization and the path ahead of us with Ted in the room. So just do it again. I want you to just go big. I don't want you to worry about eye contact. You can use your hand. I want you to channel your inner Al Pacino. Al Pacino, who can do nothing small now. It's all
okay. Everything's
big, right? Everything's big. So just over the top. So just make me feel the power. Okay? Okay. So I'm going to ask you the question again as a question. So Ted, tell me, why should we hire you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's several things that I'd like to talk to you about related to this. And one is that I think that the organization that you're
bigger.
Okay, we're gonna start over. Great question. So I've been a cybersecurity leader for over 20 years. I entered the industry when it was just beginning and people were just beginning to connect their local area networks to the internet. And I have evolved with the security industry for the past 20 years. I've been a top seller for almost every company I've worked for, President's Club level performer. And I have the knowledge and experience as well as the network that's necessary to be successful in this role. And I believe that with my knowledge and experience, I'm in an excellent position to be a significant revenue generator and a key member to your sales organization.
Wow. Okay. So I want to ask the audience, do you think that was that too big? Do you think Ted that was too over the top? Because I thought that was right on. Ted, how did that feel?
It felt good, but I had to bring it. It's like, I started and you were like, nope, more. All right. I had to bring it. And it's not natural. So the getting into that mindset, maybe going into another room and whatever you need to do that's going to kind of build your energy so that when you walk back into your office, you're like, okay, I'm ready to go and I'm going to kill it. I'm just going to kill this call or this interview, whatever it is. And I think that most people have a very difficult time doing that. And not because they're not able to do it, Julie, but I just think they don't understand that because of the screen, we have to work just a little bit harder to get our energy to pass through. And so we've got to be just a little bit more animated, a little bit more excited, and just drive that energy so think about it. You talked about actors on TV, like, certain actors can just get your attention right away. And, and you're just fascinated and you're locked into them and their character and what they're doing. And I think we want to have that same power with our customers or the people that we're interviewing with. Is we want them to lock in on us and really focus and go, wow, this guy's, got some power and is, I think that salespeople, energy is important to salespeople. It's a very, very demanding role. And so I think that that's part of that whole energy thing that because you can't do it face to face and deliver that energy directly to the customer, you're just going to have to push it a little bit harder through the screen.
Absolutely. And the consensus is that was not too big. It really was spot on. And I find that with a lot of people, they'll go so big and they feel like, oh my God, that was so, crazy. And the rest of the people in the class will say, no, that was actually just about right. So we're not good judges of how we come across to others. And that's one of the things that we need to understand. Like, we might feel certainly comfortable. Like when you first answered that question, it was, you were comfortable and it was fine. Well, fine in a competitive market is not going to get you the job. It's not going to get you the client, right? So that last one, I felt I saw a confident, credible man who has great experience and is quite, seems quite prepared for the role that I'm filling. So that was quite a bit different. So awesome.
Thank you.
But a lot of times, even when people go big, and I recommend that exercise because what we're doing is we all operate sort of in our comfort zone, right? Which is nice and it's fine for friends and colleagues, but it's not sufficient for a sales conversation, an interview, something where we're trying to make an impact or make someone feel something, which is the bottom line. And so when we stretch that rubber band and we go to the high end of it, which might be way too much, and I've had people that go way over the top. And it's like, okay, so now you know what too much is. Just pull it back a little. Just don't push it. And so we find a nicely elevated spot. But one thing you can do to prepare is, because it is a mental piece. It's not just that physical piece, but mentally prepare instead of just what do I want to say to this person? How do I want them to feel? Right. And if I want them to feel a certain way, it's not necessarily about the words. So for example, if I, let's say I cut you off while you were talking, Ted, and I said, oh, I'm sorry. Would it sound like I'm sorry?
No.
Not really.
Not
As
really.
opposed to, oh God, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's some emotion and some body language and stuff that comes across, definitely.
Right, because the first one, my intention was just to like move on, like oh, it's, it's not really that big a deal. It's I'm sorry. If you've ever had teenagers and they've made them apologize, like I'm sorry. It's like they're not sorry. They just don't want to. They just want you off their back. That's their intention. However, when someone's really sorry, they use the exact same words. And it lands much differently, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So this is the same thing. So if you can think about, and this is part of that being present, think about instead of how I'm feeling, oh, I'm uncomfortable. If I can just focus on how I want this other person to feel, right? I want you to feel that, and it may be, I want you to be reassured. Like, you're talking about security a lot of times. And, I want you to be reassured that you're in good hands, or I want you to be really concerned that this is a danger that you have to prepare for, right? There's all different types of intentions. And that's very helpful in grounding our presence in that call. So good. That was very good.
I think that the thing that I'm looking for is I want them to feel engaged. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that I want when we're doing having the meeting, the interview, whatever. It really is about, are we engaging with each other, or is it just I'm watching TV? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? The difference between passively viewing something and actively being involved in it from both sides. So it's me with my energy and everything else, but it's also they're feeding off of that and going, wow, this guy, I like what he has to say, or he's got something interesting worth listening to, or whatever. So if I were to pick like one word, for me, it would be, I want to engage with that person at a level where we are communicating back and forth, and are have a high level of focus on each other and what we're saying and what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a strong, specific intention, and that's great. The one thing about that is you're relying on the other person to engage back with you, and this is where it gets a little tricky in virtual meetings, where if you did that in person, it would probably be very automatic. If you do that on a virtual call, and especially if there's a number of people on the call, people are going to be more passive, right? They're not necessarily going to jump in. They're going to look less engaged. And I think that we have not done a good job of preparing salespeople for understanding that just like salespeople often have this low energy appearance on camera, that's how our customers show up. I talk about this resting business face that we see so often, which is, just complete poker face, no expression, no ounce of emotion. And this is not necessarily a reflection of how you feel, because if I asked you right now, are you engaged, Ted?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, your face might not necessarily reflect that. But because we have been trained when we sit in front of screens to be in receiving mode, and we're in our comfy chair at home, and our energy's down, and when our energy's down, our expressions are the first thing to go, and we're not looking at each other, it's really hard to feel like you're engaging with someone. So because of the difficulty of that, as salespeople, we again, going back to that, we have to bring enough energy for both sides of the equation. You have to trust that if you say something, like when you gave that last answer, you say something as compelling, as confident, as credible as you did, what is the other person's reaction probably going to be?
Hopefully they're gonna receive that and follow up with another question that allows me to express even further, why I feel like there might be a good fit and why we're exploring this opportunity together.
Right. So, typically we would get a typical, we would typically get the feedback we're hoping for if we show up in the right way. I mean, I think a lot of times, especially when we can't see people, when they don't have their camera on, we assume the worst when it's silent, right? When we can't see one, it's like, oh, what are they thinking? They're not there. I mean, I don't know what goes through your head when, say you just finish that statement and there's silence.
Well, I think that it goes back to the energy thing. So, like, if you're there and you're trying to really be energetic and powerful and engaging, and the other person on the other side, worst case scenario, doesn't even turn on their camera, which I had yesterday with an interview with a recruiter who wanted to have an interview, and I'm on camera because I just assumed we were going to do it that way, and I'm talking to a square on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
That's worst case scenario, and that happens way more often than we'd like, because I think a lot of the technical people that I work with, just they're kind of shy and not as outgoing, and for them there's no threat associated with not having to be on camera. So there's maybe an element of safety or whatever, but I think that what you said is really true, which is that even if you come through with all the energy and you're really working on that engagement, it doesn't necessarily mean that the person on the other side is going to engage back, and you can't let that prevent you from continuing with the energy and enthusiasm that you're carrying, because you have no idea what's going on with them in their day or what other things might be happening or, whatnot. And so I think it's true. You shouldn't make the assumption just because, they're not animated that they're not hearing what you're saying or don't care
Mhm.
what.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a skill that we have to develop because we are not used to having no one respond, for instance, when we ask a question, right? Or being able to see them processing as you do in person, being able to see them process like, oh, you can tell who's thinking about answering a question. And not so on video because either they're off camera or they don't give off those same cues. And so we have to develop some confidence around that and not and certainly pause longer during those questions. Um, but also understand even when we finish a statement, I hear a lot of salespeople after every other sentence, it's like, does that make sense? Does that make sense?
They're trying to
You know,
get that feedback.
seeking confirmation
Yeah.
and uh, reassurance that someone is there, right? And so I encourage people to focus on consider the best possible outcome when you have no other cues. Imagine the best possible outcome and respond to that, right? So if you said if you just finished that piece and nobody responded, you might say, and many times, people like to hear about a challenge that I've helped companies address. Is that something you might be interested in? Just coming back with that same energy, just assuming they're interested, they're engaged, but they're processing, right? Or there's 5 people on the call and nobody wants to step on each other's toes. It's like, oh, I bet Bob's going to answer this question or ask him something, right? So there's a lot of things going on. But if you anticipate the best possible response, even if you can't see it, can't feel it, can't hear it, it brings out the best in you. And that helps with that energy piece. I heard someone say, well, in sales, we're taught to match the energy of our audience, and that may be true in person, but that's just a death knell on video because that's going to be the most boring conversation either, because you're not going to have that dynamic energy flow typically speaking.
Yeah, but the point that you made is actually one I hadn't thought about and is really a good idea, which is that idea that assume you're getting back the best thing you could be getting back and continue with the conversation in that mode because one, we want to keep our energy up. There's a question from Doug. He says, can you comment on having the mindset to act as if you're staying focused? I don't think you can act if you're staying focused. You're either focused or you're not focused, right? So I don't know if you may have to maintain that level of engagement throughout the period of the call, certainly, but I don't think you can fake it. Like I really don't think you can fake it.
I think it's a starting point, like that act as if, and I use that when I can't see people on camera. I act as if I can see them and imagine if I say something funny, they're probably smiling. Hopefully, it's probably stupid, but I, I like to think they're smiling. Or if I say something interesting, But if you're so focused on developing this imaginary world in your head, are you really present, right? So it's a start, and then it's just a feeling of they're there. Maybe I can see them in their, I get images of them as I'm talking, but we don't want it to be an entire, acting exercise either. So there's a balance there, but it is helpful.
Well, and I think that it's our natural instinct to want to look at the person who's speaking. That's
Mhm.
just a natural instinct. It was like looking a person in the eye. When somebody speaks, you change your attention to that individual and you're engaged with that specific individual, right? And
Right.
so um, I think that through the screen, as we're trying to do that, imagining that individual as being as responsive as they could possibly be, and just and it's hard to be engaged with people that aren't engaged with you, but it's our job.
Absolutely. Right.
It's our job, right? It's our job. We need to talk to these people. We need to get them excited. We need to get them interested. We need to understand the challenges. And so this is what selling looks like in the future. It doesn't mean we're ever not going to get back to being able to go in and shake people's hands and meet people at events and conferences and whatnot. But I still think that this will continue to be one of the primary ways that salespeople interface with their customers, and the primary way companies will interview candidates. And so it's something that if you want to be successful in sales, you're going to have to dedicate some time to gaining the skill set that's associated with having all the pieces come together, so that when you do present, you are engaging, you've got the energy, and the customer is focused on what you're discussing.
Right, right. So you're present, in other words, and you're present, and you're not you don't have all that extra noise. What if, and do I look okay? Am I in the right spot? Why is no one responding to me? Managing our psychology is a lot of it, because like you said, it's a new piece. Great question from Amy here I want to address. How do you watch your Zoom partner for signs of buy-in or consensus when you are looking at the camera? And that's a great question. So here's the thing. First of all, if you have your camera set up on Zoom so that you have the images right underneath it, you can see a lot more body language than you probably realize, especially if you put if you've got one person, put them full screen. You never need to see yourself on screen. Never, never, never. Before you go on, do a check. Otherwise, that's the last person you need to see. Nobody ever looks at themselves on a live call and goes, "Oh yeah, I look great." We're like, "What is going on with my hair?" And "Oh my God, I should have done better on the setup." So don't do that. So when you can see that person, if you've got your camera set up, you can, we have stronger peripheral vision than we realize, most people. And you can see major movements. So I'm looking at my camera now. So Ted, I want you to just do some kind of movements, and let's see if I can read them. And I'm looking at my camera. This fingers up, hand up, leaning forward, back, way back. Okay, so you can capture sort of the broad, major movements, major facial expressions, changes. And certainly there are times where you want to check in. So I would say that's your macro view, right? That gives you a sense of, okay, they're there. I'm not missing somebody leaving the room, right? Then we want to do some more micro check-ins when we say something that might prompt a buying cue, right? That's the time to check in. What we don't want to do is constantly check in after every single thing we say, because first of all, what are you checking for? Because most people, this is what you're going to see. That's not going to tell you a lot, right? As I said, most people aren't that expressive. And if you have a group, if you have a lot of people, the odds of you looking at the right square at the right time for the right reaction are pretty slim, right? You're not going to catch somebody out of 10 people just at the right moment, and they're not going to do something so, necessarily that is going to be so noticeable. So it's a fine thing, it's a fine line between checking in and over checking in. And so certainly if in your macro view, you see some movement, that's constantly going on, then you want to check in a little closer or check in with that person. But again, we don't want to make it our customers' responsibility to make us feel, comfortable. So
Uh,
thank you.
yeah, and I think that for me, it's more of a psychological thing than anything else. You
Hmm.
tend to want to look at the person who's talking, wherever they are, and
Right.
so, and then I actually think that's very distracting for the customer because they see you looking all over the place, and they're like, "Why aren't
It,
you looking at me?" Which is what we all expect when we meet in
right.
person.
The psychology for the customer is very. They're not going to. The logic is, oh, Ted's looking at me on his screen. But nobody's, we're assigning logical reasoning to what's a very deeply ingrained emotional cue, right? Which is that eye contact. So again, you're right. It's it makes sense logically, but not emotionally. And we're not going to single handedly change that. Maybe that will evolve as we go on, in a virtual world, but it has not. So it's a
But
losing battle.
yeah, but it's something that I found that I have to practice. It's
Mhm.
something I have to practice. So, I've got my camera. Obviously, it's got a light on it. Most of them have a light on it to tell you that it's working. But I also have like this giant red arrow pointing at the camera, and I really have to make an effort to say, okay, stay focused here. This is where you're gonna deliver the best uh, you know, whether it's presentation or whatever it is when people think that you're looking them in the eye. And that only works when you can get used to staring at the camera, which is really unnatural for anybody who's not an actor. Why would you stare at the camera? But
Right,
that's
and
what we must do.
yeah, and I when people say staring at the camera, it's, staring is not really the right word because that feels really uncomfortable. It's we wanna adopt sort of a soft gaze as if we're in a natural conversation, right? And so, um, if we aim for 70% of the time, which is about the amount of time that it takes to build a relationship, is relationship experts say maintain eye contact for that amount of time. And that's in person, if you want to build a relationship. So if we aim for that, and certainly we're going to um, look away to gather our thoughts or check notes or check body language. But that gives enough time to really connect. And know when it means even more to connect through the camera. So for instance, what's one of your what's give me a key point of why we should hire you. What's one of those key points? And just say it as if I was the hiring director again. Okay. What's the one thing you would say, Ted, that I should hire you because of?
I have more experience working with large enterprises deploying complex security technology than any other sales rep in the industry.
Great. Okay. Very good. Now I love what he did there, which is he didn't immediately drop his eyes, right? So he said, I have more experience deploying, this in what was the last part? In any
Than any other sales.
sales rep alive.
That's right. And that's true.
That's awesome. And then he held his eye contact in the camera, right? And so in acting, we call that holding the last beat. And it's like when you say a value proposition or you ask a question, if you hold that to the camera, it's much more powerful than if I said, I'm the only salesperson in the world that can do this. Instantly looking for, right? That sends a signal of sort of a lack of credibility and calls into doubt sort of your words. So very good. So that's one of the ways that you can use eye contact very strategically when you are hoping to make a point or get a question answered. Because, like you said, people you're often quieter on camera, and if you ask a question to a group, everybody thinks it might be for somebody else. But if I'm looking at the camera and I hold it there, as opposed to So Ted, tell me about your not Ted. Say I'm talking to everybody on the call. So what's the biggest challenge you're facing today in sales? Does
The
anybody
biggest
on this but just a rhetorical question. Does anybody feel like I'm really talking specifically to you? Ted probably does because we're talking, but probably not but if I look at the camera and say that, um, what's the biggest challenge you're facing today in sales? Everybody feels like I'm talking to them. So someone is going to feel more compelled to answer that. So that's a great way to get more engagement just by, again, strategically using that eye contact.
Yeah.
So
Well,
good.
asking good questions is always one of the
Yes.
key success factors for sales.
Right. And certainly, and I think that that's something that you're right. And just adding that little extra, that video adjustment there can make it more likely to get that answer too.
Well,
So
it's kind of like a pregnant pause. People
yes.
get really uncomfortable. You watch certain people, and especially if you look at like pastors and stuff, and they use that, to make a point, and they'll make a point, and then they'll just shut up, and we're so uncomfortable with silence. We're kind of waiting for the next thing that
Absolutely.
it forces us to almost stop and think about, okay, he's doing this for a reason, for effect, right? So it's that same kind of pregnant pause thing, at least in my mind, where you answer the question and you stare at the camera like, yeah, okay, give me more, feed me,
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's understanding that just because you can't see it happening, there is a process going on in your customer's head. Very few people are just going to sit there and go, I'm not thinking about this question. You answer it, right? They're like, well, what do I think? And that can take to formulate an answer, to think about it, to decide if somebody else is going to answer it, or is your manager on the call? They're going to think you're stupid for answering that question a certain way, and then unmute yourself. That can take 15 seconds. So if you constantly shortcut that process, you teach your audience that they don't need to participate. And that's a very dangerous thing. All right. So this has gone so quickly. Hopefully for me, I don't know about anybody else, but I want to see if there's any last questions that somebody has in the audience or Ted, maybe that you have that we didn't get to.
Well,
And also,
yeah, I mean, definitely, if the audience has questions, we definitely take them out. The other thing I was just going to ask you about is so as a salesperson, I take a lot of notes. I'm a note taker, right? I need to capture information, which means I can't be looking at the screen. Like it means that, I've got a notepad generally that I've got in front of me. It's got questions I've prepared, or it's got reference information that I need to access during the call and whatnot. And so, when I'm taking notes, you're kind of just seeing the top of my head. How do you handle that? Is that okay?
well, yeah, I think notes are. We've certainly got some other options now with Zoom and recordings, but that's not for everybody. And you're in security, so it's probably less likely people want to put up with that. But if you let people know, hey, I want to make sure I get this right, so I'm going to be jotting down some notes. And then that really take the time, in between to reconnect through the camera, like when they're talking, when they start talking, maybe, connect with them first and then get down. And then, just don't forget, because what happens is a lot of times salespeople start taking notes and they just forget, and then they never quite make it back to the camera. So connect when you can, when you're done with that. But letting people know is sufficient. But again, we still want to support that with good eye contact.
Excellent.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ted. I really appreciate you being courageous and jumping in. Did a great job. And for all of you, if you'd like, I didn't mention it, but hopefully you've seen it because it's right there in your face, that there's a free trust building guide for virtual trust building, which some of the different things we have to do virtually to build trust at that link, or use that QR code. I want to give a special shout out to behind the scenes producer Bryn Tillman, who did an excellent job today. Thank you. Some of you know Bryn; she's fabulous. She's a LinkedIn guru. Follow her if you don't already. So thank you. And if you would like to be on a future episode, it wasn't so bad, was it, Ted?
No, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I learned something every time I get together with you, Julie. It's
Awesome.
absolutely amazing. I get these tidbits of gold that have improved my ability to present significantly, and but I feel like it's something that you have to practice. It's not something you just do once and forget about. It's something that you need to be practicing on a regular basis. So maybe when you're having internal calls, you can practice these skills,
Yes.
maybe when a customer's, you're not in front of a customer, but I think it's something that you have to spend the time.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. We're overcoming a lifetime of in-person, you know, reinforcement of looking at faces and all these kind of things that are different. So it does take some repetition and feedback and practice. So thank you. All right, thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you next time on Lights, Camera, Pitch.